Hey guys, welcome to Hip Hughes History. My name is Mr. Hughes, this is Noam Chomsky, and we do the teaching on the YouTubes. And hopefully you're going to do a little bit of the learning on the YouTubes right now with the Iranian hostage crisis. In the Middle East, some know this as the conquest of the American spy den. 444 days of high drama in American history, an international event that you need to know. November 4th, 1979 to January 20th, 1981, days that rocked the world and are going to rock your test, and if you don't study, going to rock your grade. So whether you're in middle school, high school, college, or cray-cray on the internet, stick around. I got some teaching, you got some learning. Giddy up, let's go. All right, guys, a little bit of backdropping. The Shah of Iran, in a sense, was like the king of Iran. And this goes back to the Persian Empire and thousands of years of history. But in 1941, the Shah of Iran was removed, in a sense, or he was changed using U.S. and Soviet influence in order to get Iran on the right side of World War II. The nephew of the Shah took over. His name was Mohammad Reza Shah. And he, at the end of World War II, chose the United States to align himself with. So we very much have an in Iran. We gave them much foreign aid and much military aid, and they gave us access to their oil. And American corporations in Iran basically controlling Iranian oil. We trained the SEVAK, the secret police of Iran. The CIA and the military had units over there, and they have a very heavy hand. Let's put it that way. But in the late 1940s, Iran begins a series of reforms and becomes more of a constitutional monarchy, where the Shah was taking a back seat to the prime minister, like a Great Britain type of system. So in the late 40s, early 1950s, the prime minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, begins to become basically a populist. He's elected as a populist. He's elected as a man of the people. And he begins to nationalize the oil industries and demanding money in war reparations, or money that Iran felt it lost in World War II, from Great Britain, who was suffering very much at the end of World War II. But nationalizing the oil industries, that didn't make us very happy. So the British Secret Service and the United States CIA instituted Operation Ajax. Don't you love these names, Ajax? And this operation was basically to topple the prime minister. And that's what happened. In 1953, there was a coup d'etat, and Mossadegh was taken out of power, and the Shah became basically an absolute monarch. The absolute monarchy means that he's going to control Iran top to bottom. And using the SEVAK, the secret police, he is arresting communists. He's arresting people that are populists and social democrats. He's arresting dissent, and basically ruling with a very, very heavy hand. So the Shah of Iran, using the SEVAK, the secret police, runs Iran, very much in a totalitarian type of manner. Even though he is striving in his speeches towards reform and democracy, on the streets he's not instituting reform and democracy. And he's also angering a very traditional population, the Shiites of Iran. There's millions and millions of very traditional Iranians in terms of religion. So seeing their leader kind of trying to westernize their nation and being a secular Muslim and gravitating towards recognizing Israel is not making the people very, very happy. So by the late 1970s, many millions of Iranians, and especially, like we said before, religious Islamic Iranians, see the Shah as an enemy of the people and the United States as a facilitator. In a sense, they see their government as a puppet of the United States. So they begin to plot and plan. And in January 1979, there is a revolution in Iran that topples the Shah, and he's exiled. He's exiled to Egypt. And quite quickly, things are going to move from there. 1979, and many people don't know this, many people think that the revolution begins with the taking of the American hostages in the embassy, but that doesn't occur until November of 1979. The revolution was January of 1979. In February of 1979, Ayatollah Khomeini, an Ayatollah is like a high priest in the Islamic faith, is flown from France, where he was in exile, back to Iran, and he now becomes very much the spiritual leader of Iran. And he is jockeying for position, trying to get people elected and his peeps in office so he can write a constitution. So by the fall of 1979, the United States is still thinking that we can be a player in Iran. But in October, the Shah of Iran, who was exiled to Egypt, develops lymphoma. And he is flown to a New York Cornell hospital, where he is given treatment. And this becomes an outrage to the Iranian people, or at least the religious Islamic people of Iran. They want their leader back. And here is the United States, whose CIA helped put him in power, taking him in. And I think very much a propaganda piece here is that the Iranian people were being told by the Ayatollah Khomeini that this was possible a U.S. plot to get the Shah back in power. So they became outraged. And by November of 1979, we're ready for a storming of the embassy. So the storming of the embassy was very much a planned event, and it wasn't planned by the Ayatollah Khomeini. The Ayatollah Khomeini wasn't even in Tehran at the time. It was planned by a number of students from the University of Tehran who actually played with the idea of invading the Soviet embassy. And you have to think that they also hated the Soviets. They're atheists and they're a Cold War player. They want influence in Iran, and geographically they're very close. And I believe there were 5 students at the first meeting to plan this storming of the embassy, and they actually had 2 people vote for the Soviet Union, but 3 wins! 3 wins! And they choose the American embassy. And the original plan was not to take the embassy for 444 days. The original plan was to stage a sit-in, to take over the embassy for a few hours, get the world's attention, and to make their demands on the American government, which were threefold. They really want an apology for our CIA history with Iran. They want the Shah back. And if they get the Shah back, you can figure out what's going to happen to the Shah. Yeah, right. And they want money. They want money from freezed assets that we have in the United States of what they see as Iranian money. So there we go. It is planned about 500 students converge on the American embassy on November 4th. The Ayatollah Khomeini had already called for thousands to be on the streets to protest the American government. And this very much is a propaganda tool for the Ayatollah Khomeini. If he can garner enough anti-American attitude on the street, this is going to bolster his position when it comes to a referendum for the new constitution. And he wants an Islamic government. He wants an Islamic government where he is the spiritual and very much pragmatic leader of the country. So the students, and they actually had one of the women students use bolt cutters, and they cut the lock and they stormed the embassy. So here we go, guys. We got a storming of the embassy. There were 66 people that were employed at the embassy that day. 9 escaped. 6 of those that escaped ended up at the Canadian ambassador's residence in Tehran. And they hid out there for a few months and eventually, go watch the movie Argo. It's about how they escaped Iran using the front of a Canadian CIA movie company, making a film called Argo. I'm going off on a tangent. 3 were captured, and then 13 were eventually released. They released pretty quickly the African Americans, and they released the women, saying that the Islamic Republic was sympathetic to the plight of minorities and discriminated people in America. So they ended up with 52, and those 52 hostages stayed for 444 days. The students had place cards that said we were here for a sit-in. But what actually occurred was they thought the Ayatollah Khomeini would support the provisional government taking the embassy back over and giving it back to the Americans. But when he saw how popular this was on the streets, that they had stormed the embassy, and now you have tens of thousands and eventually hundreds of thousands of Iranians protesting, the Ayatollah Khomeini, I think, sees this as a mechanism in order to keep himself in power and get his constitutional provisions passed so he can take over Iran. So he allows it to keep going. And they ended up keeping these hostages, these 52 hostages, for 444 days. So now let's talk about the effects of this hostage crisis. All right, effect number 1, Jimmy Carter presidency is going to be destroyed by this. The hostage takers and the Iranian government end up with 3 demands. They want an apology, they want money, and they want the Shah. And really, they're going to end up with only a little bit of one of those. But if you could imagine a foreign government taunting the president, let's say Algeria was taunting Barack Obama every day, holding American hostages, and Barack Obama couldn't get those hostages out, it would destroy his presidency. And it destroyed Jimmy Carter's presidency. And remember, this is an election year. So all throughout the campaigning, we're constantly being reminded on our television sets every day that Jimmy Carter sucks. He attempted to rescue the hostages, April of 1979 with Operation Eagle Claw, and they sent helicopters and fuel tankers. They were going to swoop in and do a Rambo-type mission, and the helicopters break and blow up and kill Marines. And this really is embarrassing for Jimmy Carter. And like I said before, Effect number one, it's going to destroy his presidency. All right, effect number two is I think there is something to the unity factor. That even though Jimmy Carter is going to look weak, if you think of the 1970s and characterize that in terms of American foreign policy, it very much is a broken foreign policy. The end of Vietnam, the atrocities that came out of that, the Pentagon Papers, Watergate, the Nixon administration. So I think America is looking for something to coalesce around. And the Iranian hostage crisis gives us that ability to wrap ourselves in a sense around the American flag. So there's a patriotism sense, a nationalism sense, and a unity sense. All right, effect number three would be a religious theocracy in the Middle East. Iran is going to stay a theocracy run by the Ayatollah Khomeini, run by religious leaders as a religious country rather than some type of parliamentary country or republic that has real democracy in it. And I think that the Iranian hostage crisis, without a doubt, was the gas that ran his ability to get his constitution passed. So for 444 days, guys, these guys lived it out in Iran as hostages. If you ask the Iranian government, they were being treated as guests. If you read the accounts of what really occurred, they didn't outright torture, like they weren't ripping fingernails out, but they were threatening to execute them after trials. They were keeping them in solitary confinement. Sometimes they were handcuffing them for days at a time. They were playing Russian roulette with some of them. At one point, they gathered all 52 and they put them into a room and they had them blindfolded and they made it like they were going to execute them, even to the point of doing a fake fire. And then they would laugh and send them back. So it's psychological torture and in a very, very real sense, physical isolation. So why does this bad boy end? I don't think it's through the genius diplomacy of Christopher Warren and the Carter administration. I think it's external factors. First, you have the Iran-Iraq war breakout. So very much Iran has other problems kind of down its alley. And if Iran looks to its right, its east border, it can see that the Soviet Union's launched an invasion into Afghanistan. And I'm sure they're probably thinking, are we next? So we can't just have this tough going on forever with the United States. So through negotiation through Algeria, so if you could imagine the Americans speaking to the French Algerians who were speaking to the Farsi-speaking Iranians, it took a long time. But purposely or not, they are released as soon as Ronald Reagan gets his inauguration speech done. And that might have been just to punk Jimmy Carter. January 20th, 1981. So there you go, 444 days. So there you go, guys. The Iranian hostage crisis taking Carter down like a clown. We hope that you learned something about the very basics of the crisis, and we certainly hope we motivated you to maybe learn a little bit more. So there you go, guys. Make sure that you subscribe to Hip Hughes History, because every time you subscribe, a kid learns how to learn. And make sure you click the description below, because I have tons of links of other great EDU channels that you should be checking out and subscribing to. So there you go, guys. Always remember my slogan, where attention goes, energy flows. And there you go, because I don't want to shout, and I don't like to pout. I don't even like the sauerkraut, but Hip Hughes is.